post-election analysis on global conflicts with attorney Andy Semotiuk. That is your topic for today. Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact-dependent. Hi, everyone. This is Mac Pearley, attorney, mediator, arbitrator, working throughout Florida and Texas. And today on the podcast, I again have my friend and colleague, Andy Semotiuk, who is an attorney up in Toronto, Canada, but who is licensed as an attorney in California, New York, Ontario, British Columbia. And so he's a well-versed lawyer who works between the US and Canada. And glad to have him back to talk to us a little bit more about the global conflicts that are raging right now in the world, especially after the election results in the US, where President-elect Trump was reelected. And just wanted to get Andy's thoughts. So, Andy, how are you doing today?
Fantastic, and I'm glad to be with you here today.
Thank you so much. And it's good to have you again. And last time we spoke, you spoke about immigration law. You also spoke about the conflict raging in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. And so, because of your experience going back decades, and I found out today that you have been a lawyer for 50 years. And
Yeah.
so, as we like to say, that's a seasoned attorney. And so you bring a lot of knowledge, to the legal space as well as the global affairs discussion. And so just wanted to have you back to talk about where things stand since last week, since the election results where Donald Trump was reelected. And this isn't a political discussion, obviously, because that's not what we really do here on the podcast, but we do like to analyze things and educate people and give people knowledge. So, talk to us about the current situation in Ukraine and what's going on with them as it relates to Russia and the war. But do the before and after about where you think things stand before the election and now that Trump has been reelected.
Thanks for asking that question. Well, I would say to start with, nobody could predict what would happen in the United States with the election of President Trump. There was some preparation in terms of potential election, but I don't think anybody considered that the election would be so overwhelming as it appears to have been. And with respect to the conflict in Ukraine, pre-election of Donald Trump, what was going on was after many months of effort, Congress finally decided to endorse and accept a bill in which about $60 billion was forwarded onto Ukraine in terms of war aid. And most people don't appreciate that most of that money, probably about 90% of the money, is spent in the United States, hiring Americans to prepare military equipment and arms and so on for use in Ukraine. But nonetheless, there was a substantial amount of support, and that was added to the previous support that the United States Congress had allocated to Ukraine. But the thing was that this is all pre-Trump. In terms of the war on the ground, what was happening was that Ukraine was stymied by two things. One was declarations of support from the West, but delivery being delayed. So, for example, there were arms that were promised to be delivered to Ukraine and they were not. An example was a Canadian promise to buy certain military equipment that was to be delivered from the United States to Ukraine, and was delayed for something like a year or longer. So it was paid by Canada to the United States to deliver to Ukraine, but it was delayed. Just as one little example. But generally, whether it's aid from the U.S. or from Europe or Canada, for example, there were delays in the delivery of what was promised. And of course, that was causing difficulties on the front. But an even more difficult problem for Ukraine at that time was the restrictions that were placed on the arms and the equipment that was supplied to Ukraine. In particular, restrictions related to long distance attacks or military use of equipment that was provided from the United States or that was provided from other countries but originated in the United States. So there was a developing scenario along the lines of, while the Biden administration was very supportive and supported NATO and Ukraine in the war against Russia, the terms of the support had Ukraine's arms tied behind its back. They couldn't use the equipment the way they needed, and as a result, they were faltering in the war on the front. Nonetheless, the war was being waged, and every day people were dying on the front. Ukraine was more successful in terms of the number of people who died relative in Russia relative to who died in Ukraine, but nonetheless, I mean the numbers are staggering. I don't know, approaching 1 million people who have died. Well, let's
Yeah,
say 500,000.
I heard recently that on the Russian side, it could literally be 750,000.
Yeah, yeah, and then you got to count at least, I would say, 300,000 on the Ukrainian side. So it's well over 1 million probably.
Yeah.
Now, so that's one aspect. That's pre-Trump election. With respect to Trump, Ukraine, generally speaking, there were two streams of thought. The dominant thought was, well, we're getting support from America, albeit we're stymied a bit in terms of the support, but at least it's there, and NATO is strongly behind Ukraine. With respect to Trump, some people argued, let's vote for Trump or let's support Trump because he's going to finish the war as he promised in 24 hours. And if that's the case, the war would be over and there would be no invalids, etc., and people dying. But the problem with it was there's no indication of how that was going to happen. And promises are easy to make but hard to live by. And so I would say overall, from the people I spoke to, and I happened to be in Miami Beach on election day at a conference of the Ukrainian American Bar Association. So I was able to talk to Ukrainian lawyers from Ukraine at that event. And the overall, I think, impression was that it was a tragedy for Ukraine. It was, it's a colossal letdown in terms of what is coming, because it seems that the Trump administration, including President Trump, has this notion that you can somehow reach an agreement between the two parties, and it may involve some trade of geographic areas to reach an armistice or some sort of temporary pause in the fighting. But what is missing from that analysis is the understanding that it's not about land. Russia's got tons of land. They don't need more land. Like they've got more land than most countries in the world. It's about people and how people are treated who are behind Russian lines attacking Ukraine. And the problem is there's a genocide happening there. People are being slaughtered. Women are being raped, children are being stolen and taken back to Russia and re-educated to become, they're told that their parents don't want them anymore, and that now they're going to be in a different kind of person, no longer Ukrainian but Russian, etc. To the point where the International Criminal Court has issued an indictment against Putin on that issue alone. And overall, um, since Trump has come to power, there's kind of a stunned realization that there's been a realignment of what's going on. And we're waiting for the second shoe to fall on the floor, sort of what's going to happen relative to NATO. Is Trump going to support NATO, or is NATO now less unified than it was before? And judging by his comments and his conduct previously when he was president, there's room to doubt that the United States will abide by its commitments to NATO, and Article 5 being that if NATO countries are ever attacked, that it's all for one, and everyone will come to the help of that NATO country that's attacked. Just the very election of Trump, I think, has raised the specter that NATO is now weakened, and that the countries that are in NATO have to build up their military might and arms, weapons, because America's no longer in the game in the long run. I believe that's generally true in Europe today. So that's kind of a momentary reflection on where we are right at the moment.
Yeah, thank you for that. A couple questions. Under Article 5, all the NATO countries have to come to each other's defense, right? But it's a it's a treaty, it's an international treaty. Being a treaty, it's a law because it was ratified by our government. And so the president of the United States has to follow the law. So I'm not quite understanding how could Trump just unilaterally not participate in defending the other countries if it's federal law because it's a treaty.
Well, I would put it this way. Just consider, as an example, suppose right now Putin is trying to invade this moment, right? While we're talking, there are
Yeah.
Russian troops building on the Ukrainian border. There are 50,000 new Russian troops coming into the border between Russia and Ukraine. And of those 50,000, there's something like 10,000 Korean troops, North Korean troops, who have joined in the conflict. So they're about to launch a major offensive. Supposing that they're successful in such an offensive, or supposing that, like, talking realistically, uh, Trump has warned Putin, hey, don't start anything new. After being elected, Trump put that forward to Putin. But in my view of things, this is kind of like gangster land, where one guy is telling another guy, hey, listen, this is my turf, stay away from my turf, kind of thing. That's not the way the game is played in that kind of a situation.
Mhm.
I doubt that Putin is going to behave better just because Trump is in power than he would have had been Biden in power, or Harris in power. As for your question, the way this would work is the most likely scenario will be if Ukraine falls, and there's a lot that could happen with Ukraine's falling, namely number of people migrating out of Ukraine into Western Europe. economic catastrophe in terms of what's going on in Europe as countries have to absorb this outflow of people. The arms and resources of Ukraine being sucked up into the Russian military machine. American Ukrainian soldiers being recruited into the Red Army and sent onto the Western Front, things of this nature. Assuming something like that happened, I think it's very likely that Putin would take a bite at some of the Baltic states, for starters, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Moldova, perhaps Poland, and any one. Let's just say that he took a bite at, let's say, Lithuania. Can we be confident with Trump's view that American soldiers are going to get on airplanes and be sent out to defend Lithuania or Latvia or Estonia? Can we be confident that French and Italian soldiers will be sent out to defend those countries because of the NATO agreement? I think there's doubt there. I think that Putin probably smells that there's, some lack of cohesion. There's lack of resolve in terms of Western stand in regard to the conflict in Ukraine. Like if NATO cannot consider this, the people who are dying defending Ukraine are Ukrainians. There are no other countries involved in the actual conflict. There are countries feeding arms and ammunition and stuff to Ukraine and supporting Ukraine economically. But the people who are dying are Ukrainian men largely and some women. The question is, it's one thing to send a few dollars or send some arms. It's another to send your men and women to fight in conflict. And I think that's a critical difference that we're facing down the road in the not too distant future. And the other thing is, I think from Putin's point of view, not to mention China, for example, and North Korea and the others, if they can't defend Ukraine, what is the likelihood they're going to be able to defend, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, etc.? I think for him, it's an opening of a door that will lead to much more conflict. And I think he will take advantage of what he sees as a weakness.
Do you think that there's likely to be some kind of negotiated settlement between, with the aid of Trump? I know that those terms may be very favorable to Russia, but do you think that that's likely the result?
It's a misreading of what Ukrainians are fighting for. For Ukraine, it's life and death. It's not, cut off a piece of geography and let's all go home. What did all these guys die for? They didn't die to cut off a piece of Luhansk and give it to Russia. They're dying because their thing is, it's our land. You invaded. Now get out. That's what the thinking is in Ukraine. And there's no sense, despite what might be said in the West, there is no change in view. Like it's a blow that Trump was elected to Ukraine in the sense that there's more uncertainty about whether he will come to Ukraine's aid, and judging by the people he's appointing to his cabinet, there's every reason to believe that the aid is not going to be there. There are people openly hostile to Ukraine, to the Ukrainian war in cabinet. So, I believe Trump is thinking like, oh, I'm a big deal maker, and I'm just going to call Zelensky and say I'm cutting off all the aid to you unless you agree to the terms of a deal. And he's going to call Putin and say, listen, we're going to have to, we'll give you this part here, and let's sign the agreement. The problem is it's unenforceable. Any agreement with Russia is unenforceable. It's You can talk about an agreement, but the whole experience with Russia has been that Russia doesn't abide by agreements.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's
we
no
went.
sense in talking about agreements
Yeah,
with
no,
them.
you went through that last time we
Yeah,
spoke, where you were giving the history of all the different
yeah.
phases that we had gone through since the '90s after the end of the Cold War, and so that becomes, the question: w- what does it look like, um, even if there is some kind of deal, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, what happens? I forget Putin's age, but it doesn't seem like he's going anywhere anytime soon.
No, he seems to be quite healthy for a while anyway. Um, it might be a frozen conflict where, a win for him would be if, because when he started, I think his thought was 3 days and it's all over and I have Ukraine. Now,
Yeah,
his purpose, Putin doesn't want Eastern Ukraine. Putin wants Kiev. Kiev to him is the mother of Russia, according to his view of history.
yeah,
It's all about Christianity and how it came to that part of the world, and Kiev was where Christianity started. And he has sort of co-opted Ukrainian history in terms of seeing it as Russian history. So, from his point of view, a deal where he's getting a slice of Eastern Ukraine, which he has right now, is not much of a deal. He needs his aim is to have Kiev and basically take over Ukraine. He wants to take his stated aim is to destroy the Ukrainian nation because we're all fascists according to his view of the world. We're all Nazis.
mm,
I count myself as a Ukrainian in that sense because I'm a Ukrainian Canadian.
yeah.
Um, so his view is let's just destroy the whole works because they're not Russians. They are Russians. They're not Ukrainians. They just don't understand that they're Russians. So so giving him a piece of Luhansk or Donetsk or Crimea, I don't think will satisfy what he wants. He may agree to such a thing as a temporary measure because it's been a strain on the Russian economy, and he may be at the bottom end of his resources for a while. But the best that will do is postpone the conflict for a few years before it goes again. So my view is the way the conflict has to resolve is I think there has to be a change in Russia in terms of the way that country sees itself in the world and how it views the rule of law and international obligations, etc., which is a difficult thing to bring about.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, China's viewing what's going on and thinking about Taiwan. North Korea is thinking about South Korea, and we've got this building tension in Asia, which I think will all be looking at what happens in Ukraine. I think the answer really boils down to this: the solution to this problem is in Ukraine, and it's a problem for not only NATO, but also for Asia, and basically it's a global issue. The way Ukraine and the Russian invasion of Ukraine is resolved will resolve how things go in other areas of the world.
Okay. Well, we'll be looking at it very closely, and certainly the next few months are going to be crucial in this conflict.
Yeah.
So let's turn over to the other hot war going on right now in the Middle East. We don't have too much time to spend on it, but just kind of wanted to get same kind of analysis, a pre and post Trump election. What are your thoughts about what might happen? I know recently something I saw that stood out to me was that Qatar, who had been one of the lead negotiators in trying to broker some kind of deal over hostages between and a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, basically said, you know what, we're done. We're going to get out of the mediation business. And so I don't I that happened right after Trump got elected, so I'm not sure how that's connected, but just wanted to get your thoughts about where things stand now, and if things did change either for the better or for the worse, in your opinion, once the election happened last week.
Yeah. Um, my view on the Middle East is sort of the common view, which is there needs to be a two-state solution to the Middle East. That is to say, Palestinians should have a state and Israelis should have a state, and somehow we have to find peace between those two states. I was very impressed by George Mitchell and how he settled Northern Ireland and the bitter dispute there for many years. And basically, the way he did it is he listened for days and days to both sides until they kind of realized, well, we have to do something. The people are dying, and it was a marvel the way he settled that. Now I don't know if that's going to work in the Middle East, but I can't think of a better way. But let's say this. The war's been going on. I mean, this conflict has been going on ever since the creation of the State of Israel, and even before, perhaps. Back in the 40s. The sort of key elements of the recent tension have been first the slaughter initiated by Hamas on Israelis. Like over 1,000 people killed and the hostages taken. And Israel's right to defend itself, including trying to get at Hamas and clean out Hamas as an enemy. But then, from my point of view, there's been an overreaction in terms of the two sides, in terms of how much suffering has been involved, where millions of people have been displaced in Gaza and have no place to go, and the war with Hamas is ongoing, but it doesn't seem like we're getting as far as we would like to get with them. I know the hostages are right in there, and no matter what I can say, I don't have a magic solution for how to resolve the Middle East conflict for everybody. It's a shame that Qatar has backed off the way you've described. There is a need for continuing negotiations. America doesn't look that good in terms of how it's been approaching the Middle East, especially given the new appointees that President Trump has announced. The Huckabee appointment. Huckabee is a person, he's being appointed as the U.S. ambassador to Israel.
Correct.
His views are he's opposed to the two-state solution. In other words, well, what is the solution? His solution is get all that land and give it to the Jewish Israeli state, and let the Arab nations absorb the Palestinians elsewhere, I think, is the way that he sees the world. And it's strange because I remember in the 70s, the view about what was going on in Israel. This is when those athletes were killed in Munich and so on.
Yep.
And we first learned about the Palestinian Liberation Organization. That organization was dedicated to the creation of one state consisting of Palestinians and Jews, and it would be a multinational state with, a parliament or a body, a political body that would rule over the lands that are now, Israel and Palestine. And it's very similar to what the Jewish view of what could be done now is, which is, like, I would say that Netanyahu and his cabinet and so on are viewing what's going on with the idea that they want to clean out the West Bank and convert it into a Jewish state. But their view is that it should be just a Jewish state, and to remove the Palestinians from there because of either a biblical claim that they have, the Jewish people have, like a historical biblical claim, or because they simply have the capacity to clear out the area, and once that's done, they have the view that they can keep that state strong and healthy, despite everything. They have atomic bombs and stuff. But it's just not a workable solution. It's got to be. It's going to have to. The way I see it is going to have to be either a democratic state consisting of Jewish people and Palestinian Arabs. With the whole key to the Middle East is Jerusalem. Where does Jerusalem fit into the picture? And the only way I could see some sort of a peace arising from it is if Jerusalem is created into an international state, something like the Vatican is now, because everybody has a claim to it. The Jews have a claim to it. The Arabs have a claim to it. The Christians have a claim to it. And it's impossible to satisfy everybody about Jerusalem and how it should be handled, except, in my view, as an international focus for life in the Middle East, where, as an international city with its own government and consisting of people from all three religious views and independent of each one of the states that will be in the region, but can be regarded as the capital of all the states, both Israeli and Palestinian. That's the only way I could see that conflict being resolved in some way.
So we haven't even spoken about Iran, the whole other elephant in that room. But if you were to give advice to President Trump once he takes power in January, when he's having to face all these different global hot wars, what would it be? Just if you were able to get 5 minutes with him and just tell him, listen, do this, don't do this, what would you say?
Yeah. I don't think that Huckabee is a good appointment because now Trump is going in the direction of a one-state solution for the Jewish people, that Israel will become a Jewish state. And I don't know if it can be a democracy and a Jewish state. That's the problem, because there are Arabs in Israel that live there and have been there for hundreds of years, unless you're going to wipe them out in some kind of genocide or something. But appointing someone who has the views that Huckabee does, Judea and Samaria as opposed to the West Bank, and utter disregard for any Palestinian presence in Israel, that's like a hot potato. I don't know how anybody can deal with that conflict being so one-sided in terms of the appointment. And I just might point out, the two-state solution is generally supported by most of the Arab states in the region and the United States. And moving the embassy, the American embassy, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem was very popular among the Israelis in the Jewish population, but it's not generally internationally regarded as a solution to the problem, in the sense that unless there are concessions related to the Palestinian presence in the Middle East, it's not helpful to just concede everything that the Israelis want, and move along that agenda without addressing the concerns of the Palestinians in the area. And God, look, the hostages are a problem that have to be dealt with, and it appears there's no way to deal with the hostages other than to negotiate and see if there's a way of coming to terms with the people in the Middle East, particularly Hamas and the Palestinian leadership. Um, it's not the way I want it. I don't want any of the hostages harmed. I want them all released, but I can't see any other way. Like, I don't think we can shoot our way into a solution to the hostage crisis. I'm not sure that's the right way to deal with the whole issue. And a bit of humanity and compassion would go a long way, and humility would go a long way to solving problems in the Middle East on both sides, on all sides, if it can be found. And the way to do that is lead with it. You show, you're in control of yourself. So you show the compassion and the humility and the decency. Um, the other way is pick up a gun and start shooting everybody.
Yeah, it's not gonna work unless lives are endangered. But at this point, would you say that you would describe this as a stalemate when it comes to the hostage situation?
Yes. Um, what we need is some really good negotiators, people who can listen and talk to these people, and work on. I don't believe Donald Trump is the right guy to negotiate a settlement of the hostages. I think what he's going to lead to is, let's shoot everybody. I, Sorry, but that's the way I feel. I think there are people who could do it, but it's not going to be the people he's appointing to the various posts that are related to the Middle East. Um,
Understood. Well, look, I mean, you said earlier we don't have a magic wand to solve this problem. It's complicated, and there's strong feelings on every side,
yeah.
and so people need to just take a step back, think about what could work. You brought up the whole George Mitchell example: discussion, negotiation, conversation. It never hurts talking, right? Because once that ends, then the shooting starts. And I mean, I think Israel had to react and had to respond after October 7th. It's just that at this point, what do we do? And I think everybody's looking for leadership. And hopefully, the president elect is going to, be listening and
I'll share
considering.
share one other thought, which is Iran is behind this and Russia's behind this as well. As a matter of fact, I think there was a survey done about who's responsible for what's going on in Gaza and so on. And prior to October 7th, um, the Israeli population considered Iran the main player there. But thereafter, it seems that they have turned and realized that Russia is behind all of this as well. So there, you've got Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, Venezuela, these kind of countries in the mix, and you just got to be clear on who's behind everything. I think that's helpful.
Gotcha. So at this point, we're going to end the conversation, but we'll continue it because I think there's going to be a lot of big developments in the next number of months and possibly the next few weeks. I mean, you've been seeing what's been happening with the cabinet appointments the last few days. Everything is going by so quickly, and I would love to get your thoughts, in 2 months from now and see where things stand. All
Good.
right, and before we go, reminding people that you are an attorney, at the Pace Law Firm, and so again, like I said before, you've been doing this for at least 50 years, and your big focus now is immigration.
Yeah.
And so, if folks want to contact you, the best way is pacelawfirm.com.
Right.
And if people are listening to this and not watching it, then of course they can just go to pacelawfirm.com. That's PACE lawfirm.com. All right, Attorney Andy Semotiuk, thank you so much for the conversation today and for sharing your thoughts on
Thanks, man.
post election analysis. All right, until next time, everybody, take care.